Tonight on Newshour, the legacy of Jeffrey Epstein resurfaces. And this time, it's President Trump who's under fire from his own core supporters. Once a source of rallying cries for conspiracy theorists and MAGA loyalists, the Epstein case has long lingered on the fringes of American politics. Trump himself previously shared posts casting doubt on Epstein's death and engaged with speculation online. But this week, the president has taken a sharp turn. In comments that stunned and baffled supporters, he called renewed interest in Epstein a Democratic trap and described those still demanding answers as, quote, weaklings. His remarks come just days after the US Department of Justice reaffirmed its conclusion that Epstein died by suicide and that no such client list exists. Well, the backlash has been swift. Many Trump loyalists feel abandoned by the man who once gave credence to their suspicions. Several administration figures had previously amplified the theories now being disavowed. What explains this dramatic reversal then? And has the president overplayed his hand in dismissing an issue that energized so much of his political base? Let's take a look at this report.
But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody.
The Epstein saga has burst back into the news, and the White House is racing to stem the fallout. Jeffrey Epstein, the wealthy financier and convicted sex offender, was facing charges of sex trafficking minors when he died by suicide in jail in 2019. Now, the Justice Department is facing backlash for its handling of the case, even from some of Trump's most loyal supporters.
To respond to the MAGA base that has expressed a lot of frustration about it.
We're going to fight to keep America safe again, and we're fighting together as a team. That's what's so important right now.
The Justice Department stirred outrage last week with a memo. It confirmed prior findings that Epstein died by suicide in jail and that there was no incriminating clients list, refuting a number of long-held conspiracy theories surrounding Epstein. But that hasn't convinced some MAGA influencers who are demanding the release of more documents.
Really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going. But credible information, let them give it. Anything that's credible, I would say let them have it.
In an effort to contain the fallout, White House sources say officials are weighing unsealing new documents. One source told Reuters that Trump and senior aides have reached out to key MAGA-aligned influencers, urging them to dial down their criticism of the administration's handling of the investigation.
I call it the Epstein hoax. Instead of talking about the things we've achieved, we've had tremendous achievement. They're wasting their time with a guy who obviously had some very serious problems.
Trump knew Epstein socially in the 90s and early 2000s. During the 2021 trial of Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, a witness testified that Trump flew on Epstein's private plane multiple times. Trump has denied ever being on the plane and has not been accused of any wrongdoing.
Okay, over now to our correspondent Tony Waterman, who's been following the reaction. She filed this report earlier from Washington.
Well, Guy, Donald Trump has never faced this type of backlash from his MAGA base before, and it seems to have caught him by surprise, and his patience is now wearing thin. In a scathing social media post, Trump tried to make this distinction, saying that it's his past supporters who are fixated on Epstein and that they bought, in his words, the Epstein hoax hook, line, and sinker. He called them weaklings who have been duped by Democrats to do their dirty work. And then shortly after, in an Oval Office press briefing, President Trump said that he had lost a lot of faith in certain people over Epstein without naming names. But some of Trump's most loyal followers, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, and far-right commentator Laura Loomer, have all called for the full Epstein files to be released, and at least one Republican is now trying to force a vote in the House to release these files. Epstein was a financier. He was accused of sex trafficking young girls, but he committed suicide while in jail awaiting trial back in 2019. But this conspiracy around Epstein, that he had this client list and that he was murdered to keep that list hidden, is quite foundational to the MAGA movement, because to them, it is proof of this so-called deep state trying to cover things up to protect powerful people. And Trump and many in his administration have really stoked conspiracy theories like this for years now, promising to bring all the facts to light once they were in power. But now that they are the ones in charge, it's proven much harder to keep the conspiracies alive. The U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi, for example, said back in February that she had the client list on her desk to review, but earlier this month sent out a memo essentially debunking the Epstein conspiracy theory. It's causing this massive divide within the MAGA world, where Trump's most loyal supporters are now left with essentially one of two realities: that they were lied to about the conspiracy theory from the start, or that Trump and his team are now part of the deep state trying to cover things up to stay in power.
Okay, for more on the fallout and all the implications of this, we're joined by political analyst and Fox News contributor Steve Gill, who is in Nashville for us. Steve, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much for joining us again on Newshour. This U-turn then, to what extent do you think this has damaged the president's credibility with his core supporters?
I think it's damaged, if not shredded, the credibility of the Department of Justice, the FBI, Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and yes, the Trump administration. And it's a completely self-inflicted wound. Now, I do think there's some confusion over the, quote, list. There's the flight lists of airplane flights, some of which went to Epstein Island. Some were simply flight logs in the United States. And when you hear that Trump was on the list of flights, he would fly a couple of times decades ago within the United States, hitching a ride from Mar-a-Lago back to New York or vice versa. There were those that were flying to Epstein Island. Trump is not on that list, and that list has been released. But the idea that there is some little black book detailing the preferences, the sexual preferences of the clients, apparently that does not exist. But what we do know exists is there were videotapes and photographs and audio tapes that Epstein was doing in his New York facility and on Epstein Island. Where are those videotapes? The Department of Justice has acknowledged they have that information, but they don't want to disclose the identity of victims. Well, nobody wants the identity of victims. Who are the guys having sex with them? If there are videotapes, they're identifiable. And I think what hurts the credibility of the DOJ and the Trump administration is that's what people are seeking. Who were the guys who were having sex with these underage women, not the photos and videos of the underage women themselves?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Steve. I think the president describes some of these details as sordid but also boring. Like it or not, those sordid details are things that I think the general public, or some people in the general public, would be interested to understand. Why has this been closed off then? Because one of the arguments put forward by people who are very angry at this is that, it's all an elite club. Details that might harm very powerful people will get hushed up. And this kind of seems to almost play to that argument in a sense.
Well, the only way you stop conspiracy theories is by being transparent and open and honest. And I think if they're not hiding something, they sure look like they are. And that's what keeps a story like this alive, both in the internet sphere and in the mainstream media. And among those that President Trump is calling weak and stupid for pursuing this includes his son, Don Jr., who texted and tweeted just a day or so ago asking for answers to this stuff. So President Trump is not just taking shots at his base, he's taking shots at his own family members in some cases. I think that with Epstein Island, you had these very powerful politicians and celebrities and others that were traveling to Epstein Island where these sordid sexual events were taking place. And again, it's not the victims that we want identified, it's the perpetrators. And that should be something that that should be put out there. Now, one of the conspiracies that I tend to subscribe to is that Israeli intelligence, U.S. intelligence agencies were involved and perhaps running Epstein, getting information from him that they could use against celebrities and politicians and business people, and that may be the source of the, quote, cover-up, because the president, the Trump administration, does not want to damage either our own intelligence agencies or others who may have been acting in concert with Jeffrey Epstein.
I mean, this brings me on to a question, a very straightforward question that I was going to put to you, Steve, which is, does anybody know the full truth of who he was and why he was doing what he was doing? Because so many of these leaders, so many people coming out now seem to be suggesting that even though they are powerful themselves, they don't know the full truth. So I think a question that a lot of people are asking is, who does know the full truth about who he was and why he was doing what he was doing?
Well, there were videotapes of FBI agents, carrying out boxes of detailed information, videotapes, records. What happened to those boxes? So somebody knows what happened to that stuff. But more importantly, Ghislaine Maxwell was at the center of it. She was prosecuted. She was convicted. She is in jail for about 20 years to come. So she knows. And the question is, will she trade off what she knows for maybe being released? And if they didn't have enough to convict Jeffrey Epstein, what did they use that are still sealed and redacted in her case that they used to convict her if there's no information? So I think Ghislaine Maxwell knows more than we've been told, and there are certainly others, both within the Israeli and U.S. intelligence community, who probably also know a lot more than we've been told.
Do you think Mr. Trump has handed ammunition to his opponents by doing this? Or do you think it's more of a stalemate, given that there were prominent Democrat and prominent Republican names that were included on that flight itinerary? Is it a sense of, can anybody really get any political capital out of this? Or do both political parties stand to lose?
I think the fear on both sides is that both sides are vulnerable in terms of some of their leadership, some of their big donors being caught up in this net. And you have as you put it, a stalemate where nobody wants to get the answers because they know it's going to hurt them as well as their political enemies as well. And I don't think that President Trump has handed the weapon, the ammunition to his enemies. I think he loaded the pistol and shot himself in the foot with the way this has been handled by him and his inner circle in the administration. And it is, as he's pointed out, distracting from the successes he has had recently and is trying to have in global events as well. It is a major distraction, and it is the kind of thing that the media loves because it's about sex, it's about intrigue, it's about money, it's about powerful people. All of the stuff that's a lot more interesting than tax policy, Fed policy, and inflation numbers.
And Steve, you're someone that understands the core support of the president very well. Where do you feel he is at the moment in terms of his popularity? We know that obviously he has a very strong, loyal base of supporters. Equally, we've seen some not too favourable approval ratings recently. Where is he at the moment when it comes to his approval?
I think he has banked great political capital with his base, certainly with the MAGA base. He could draw down on that political capital and still be in great shape with the base. The question is, does this media obsession with this story, because I think it's more the media obsession with it rather than reporting the truth of locking down the border from illegals coming in, inflation numbers at record lows, the economy booming, new job creation, and new investment in the United States, the tariff producing hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars in additional revenue. There's a lot of good news, but that's not getting communicated effectively right now to those independent swing voters that are going to be critical in the U.S. midterm elections in 2026. That's where I think he needs to focus his attention and get back on track on communicating what he is doing in a positive way, somehow find a way to to end this particular story so he can get back to telling his story to those that will be the swing voters in 2026, where he does not have as much political capital.
I mean, Steve, we all know that the way the world works is that there are some things that understandably are very sensitive. We all accept the need for intelligence organizations to do their job to keep nation states safe. Nevertheless, do you think that there's anything anyone can do to find out the truth about who this man was and what he was doing? Because it seems like journalists, interested parties, people speaking on behalf of victims have all said, look, we demand to know the truth about this. And the answer that's come back is, I'm sorry, it's too sensitive. The answer is no. Is there anything more that can be done?
Well, when you see documents that have been completely redacted, where literally the entire document is blacked out, that also does not help in terms of transparency and the appearance of getting to the bottom of the story. Overall, this is the kind of story that if you submitted it as a Hollywood script, they would reject it because it's too far to believe that you have this guy that is operating at the highest levels financially with no apparent business operation, no apparent connection to actual business, and yet was producing tens of millions of dollars for himself of questionable origin. He gets caught with dealing these women to very high-level people 20 years ago, and then the Department of Justice suddenly dismisses the case, and he's back on the street making money again, continuing to operate his quote businesses, sordid and financial, in New York and on Epstein Island. Those sorts of things raise huge question marks, and nothing that's being done has ended them. And then you get the suicide, you get Ghislaine Maxwell in jail, not being forthcoming about what happened. Again, if you submitted this as a script to Hollywood, they'd say it's too unbelievable to proceed.
Steve, what about the Supreme Court in this? Is there any group that might be powerful enough to actually force some further transparency?
Well, you've got the documents related to the Ghislaine Maxwell prosecution that have been sealed. If they were released, and again, if you redact the names and identities of the victims, that would be helpful because it would not look like the courts and the Department of Justice are hiding something. And I think everybody is sensitive to not wanting to re-victimize these young women that were used and sexually trafficked. But again, it takes two to tango. So it's not it's not what they were doing, what was being done to them and by whom ought to be identified. And any videos that are showing a young woman engaged in sexual activities that forced upon her is also going to reveal who was doing it to her. And that's the information I think the MAGA base is asking for. Show us those who were victimizing these women, because they ought to be identified. And it may not be a written list, but there's certainly evidence that was used against Ghislaine Maxwell, that was prepared to be used against Jeffrey Epstein, and that we have pretty good certainty exists. Where is it?
Steve, do you think we might be driving a wedge, a permanent wedge, between the political establishment and the electorate? If the closest thing to a libertarian president, if even he is perceived to be closing ranks and shutting doors on things that the public is interested in, do you think that that might cause irreparable damage between Washington and the wider country?
I think that ship has already sailed. I think that gap of trust and credibility for Washington, whether it's the swamp or, quote, traditional Washington, I think there is a Grand Canyon divide between the electorate, voters, and what they see and believe coming from Washington. I consult and work with political candidates and members of Congress and Senate all the time, and I constantly tell them that when they're doing their press conferences with the Capitol building behind them, staging it so it looks big and beautiful and the Capitol's right behind them, that is the exact wrong thing to do, because all that does is remind the people viewing the newscast or viewing their video, oh, that's one of those idiots in Washington that I don't trust and I don't like. So if you're going to do your videos or your newscast, do it in front of a school, do it in front of a farm, do it in front of a gas station or at a grocery store, because every time you remind people that you're in that big, beautiful Capitol building, it reminds them that they don't like you.
Do you think then there's perhaps room for a different type of honesty in politics, Steve, where politicians, candidates come out and say, look, to be truthful with you, running a country is difficult and complex, and there are many things that I can't share with you. There are legitimate reasons why intelligence operations have to be completely secret. There are legitimate reasons why we can't always explain everything to you at the most transparent level. Is that almost like a type of honesty perhaps that might start to emerge?
I think that that's a legitimate excuse. It's a legitimate reasoning. But when you have the credibility that has been so shredded in this case and for many years before, again, when you had 51 intelligence agents, sign a letter claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russia intelligence, and it was proven to be false. They knew it was false. It was to use the intelligence information for their own political benefit to help Joe Biden. Those are the things that over time have destroyed the credibility. This does not help, particularly when President Trump, ran on the idea that I'm going to clean out the swamp. I'm going to hold these Department of Justice and intelligence agencies accountable. And then it looks like just more of the same. I think the problem for President Trump is his brand is that honesty, is that I'm going to be straightforward. I'm going to tell you the truth, good and bad. And this is what damages his brand and his credibility, which is why I think they need to right the ship as soon as possible, because his whole brand is that honesty and trustworthiness. And I'm going to tell it like it is, whether you like to hear it or not. This damages that brand. And as you point out, he's one of the few that has been trusted, and he doesn't need to lose that trust over something like this.
Finally, Steve, whilst I've got you here, I'd just like to get your view on this idea of Mr. Trump running for a third term that Mr. Bannon and others have been putting forward. What's your sense on the likelihood of that?
President Trump is the greatest troller in history. He can say things that keep the left and the media transfixed, kind of like a magician saying, hey, look over here while he's robbing your wallet with the other hand. So I think that this is an example of Trump says something casually or offhand, and then it becomes something that is obsessed both by some on his side. There is not a snowball's chance in Hades that I think President Trump runs for a third term. I think he is focused. I think his team is focused on the window of opportunity they have between now and the midterms and then the remaining 2 years of his administration to get things done. And I think we've seen the first 6 months or so that focus, that intensity, that pace has produced amazing results. And I think that pace is going to continue if they can keep from getting distracted by their own, again, self-inflicted wounds.
Steve, it's always great to get your analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining us from Nashville.
Thank you.
Okay, that is all for this edition of Newshour. From unsealed files then to unexpected fallout, President Trump's reversal on Epstein has exposed deep fractures within his own support base and rekindled questions many thought had been laid to rest. From all of us here at A News, thanks for being with us.